had been pretending to be happy for a number of years, but I was not paying attention to my inner life. I woke up around midnight, incredible energy was coming out of my chest, and it was white scintillating light, and it was love, but also peace and joy. The peace I have never felt before, and my consciousness is everywhere. That consciousness was not just in my body. We are a field, we are not the body. I am a part whole of one. Only quantum physics could explain what happened.
Physicist Federico Faggin invented silicon gate technology and the microprocessor, the foundational breakthrough now powering all modern technology. His remarkable and spontaneous spiritual experience revealed the true nature of reality and changed how quantum science is explaining consciousness and how the world really works.
There is no longer a boundary between science and spirituality. Who I am was not at all what I thought I was. I thought that I was separate from the world. I was studying neuroscience, biology, trying to understand how things work. I realized that books were talking about electrical biochemical signals in the brain as if that was our conscious experience. That doesn't make any sense. For me to know myself, I need to know the others like myself. That's what cooperation is. And what is that allows us to cooperate? Love. Love is the taste of meaning.
The next evolution in medicine would be for all of us to have a better collective understanding of this oneness and the deeper reality that consciousness and free will are providing, so that even medicine could be affected by the ways that we approach the cellular systems.
That was the problem that no scientist had actually solved.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik.
And I'm Jonathan Cohen.
And welcome to our breakdown. We've talked a lot about reality here, and maybe reality is more than we can see. But today we have the opportunity to speak to one of the greatest technologically savvy, intellectually rigorous physicists who has changed the way we literally live our lives. Meaning he created silicon gate technology in 1968. That's what underlies all of modern computing. Why would we speak to this man about consciousness and reality? Because he had a remarkable, spontaneous, spiritual experience, which allowed him to combine everything he knew about physics, neuroscience, biology, and computers to construct a theory of everything that explains literally not everything you experience, not everything you think you know, everything that subserves everything that we experience. Federico Faggin is an Italian physicist-turned-inventor. His latest book, Irreducible: Consciousness, Life, Computers, and Human Nature, is a fantastic journey about the oneness and the totality of our existence, as well as the significance of consciousness and free will as fundamental components, not just of our existence, but the existence of the universe.
This is a fascinating conversation. We touch on health, our internal experience, the idea that we create our reality and how to shift it, the nature of happiness and what will actually bring us happiness, as well as how the world can possibly change by better understanding that we were all interconnected and a part of the whole.
And if you're watching this episode and you think there might be something wrong with your screen because you see smoke coming out of our ears, that's just our brains working really hard to grasp and understand this conversation and the implications it has for how we view reality and how we go about loving each other and loving ourselves, and how the role of love actually can change the entire world. Without further ado, we welcome from Italy, Federico Faggin to the breakdown. Break it down. I wonder if you can tell us, what is your mission? What do you think your purpose is before we get into how you got here?
Obviously, my purpose is to do what I came here to do. And so then the next question is, what did I came here to do? I think what I'm doing right now, I think, is my purpose. To have lived many lives in one life, and to have reached a level of understanding that without the I'm speaking about my fourth life now. Without the other three lives, I could never have achieved. And the other three lives were quite full. My second life, my first life, of course, born, raised, and educated, and first work experiences in Italy. Then went to the US. My second life was as an inventor, both technology and products, and then managing the R&D of Intel at one point, and then decided to be an entrepreneur. So I started my own company, started several companies, and that developed different aspects of me. After having done all of that, I was unhappy. And so I didn't understand why. Why should I be unhappy when I have achieved everything that I could possibly imagine to be happy? And I had all the reasons to be happy. And then I had an extraordinary experience of consciousness because I wanted to understand. And that changed my life. And so I'm on my fourth life after this extraordinary experience. And I'm really, now I know that I came here to do that. And I needed all the other lives in order to do that.
So many people look for happiness in things and in titles and in accolades and in careers. What do you think was necessary about that journey? Do we all need to struggle? Like, does everyone have their own personal struggle? And at the end, there's a spiritual awakening waiting?
I don't know if that is for everybody, but certainly for me was. I had to go through many struggles, but also I enjoyed every part of my life. So it wasn't like, oh my God, how what am I going to do now? No, I've always followed my passion. But I was expecting, though, that after having achieved all of what I've achieved, beautiful family, everybody healthy, a beautiful career, famous, enough money that I didn't need to work, all that kind of stuff that normally living in a beautiful place like Silicon Valley and on it goes, right? I wasn't happy and I didn't know why. And of course, now I can tell you because I was living outside of me
Hmm.
and not paying attention to my inner life. And I had completely neglected my interiority. But it took a while. Then I had to go through some struggles to actually figure out what was going on. And after 20 years of work, I realized that I actually ended living many of the traumas when I grew up and so on, so that those were out of the way. And I achieved a high level of, tranquility, if you want. Just my mind is not busy. My mind is, it's perfectly fine, and I don't have all these jumbles and stuff that goes on all the time that I had before. I was restless before. I didn't know that I was restless, but because I thought that I was doing the right thing. But now I can tell you, I never was where I was. I was always somewhere else in my mind. I was, my project, what I was going to do, 2 weeks from now, tomorrow, a year from now, and on it goes, right? So and now I'm just I'm living my life, and I'm living my life day to day as it happens, and but I know that I am living exactly what I need to live, and that changed completely my interiority is very tranquil, serene.
A lot of the focus of our podcast and our interest is the intersection of science and spirituality. And one of the reasons we're so eager to talk to you is because your brain, right, is holding so much of what many would deem the materialist side, right? You have the ability to be rational, you're an inventor. I mean, you've changed the world with the technology that you created. And also, you have access to a completely other side that many people consider unable to be reconciled with this scientific, rational side. I wonder if you can talk us through what the actual spiritual experience was that you had and how your rational mind came to understand what was transforming inside of you.
I had several, many, in fact, transformative experiences, but the first one was the most important because it revealed that who I am was not at all what I thought I was. I thought that I was separate from the world, and I lived as a separate individual. Even if I love many people, obviously my wife, my children, but still I'm separate. I don't know if it was end of December or early January, but it was in the Christmas holidays of 1990. And it was after I had realized that I had been pretending to be happy for a number of years, but I wasn't happy. And I was studying neuroscience at that time. I was developing neural networks. My company was in that business starting 1986. So I was studying neuroscience, biology. I was trying to understand how things work. And I realized that those books were talking about electrical signals, biochemical signals in the brain, as if that was our experience. They were describing, in essence, our conscious experience by electrical signals and biochemical signals. And so, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. You know, yes, there is something going on in the brain, and clearly it has to be connected with our experience. But how can electrical signals in the brain be the taste of food, or the smell of flowers, or the touch that I have when I touch something? That goes, that there is a transformation that has to go from there to the feeling side, because I understand not by seeing electrical signal, I understand by the sensations and feelings the qualia that David Chalmers, as you probably know, later on, 7 years later, wrote a book, on consciousness. He realized that that was the problem that no scientist had actually solved. And so I actually discovered that on my own at that time, because I was trying to understand what's going on, trying to understand how to make better computers that learn and so on and so forth. But I also realized that that was my problem. My inner problem was about that, that I realized that the consciousness must exist somehow, but I didn't know what it was. And consciousness was also what made me suffer. And I didn't know that. So I had two good reasons to find out: personal reason, and of course an intellectual reason, because I wanted to understand. As a physicist, I'm always trying to figure out things. And it was in that climate that one night I woke up around midnight. I was thirsty. I went to get a glass of water, went back to bed. And while I was trying to get back to sleep, a beam of light, it was energy, but incredible energy, was coming out of my chest. And it was white scintillating light, and it was love. It was me, because my consciousness was in this energy. I was also this thing that was coming out of me. How is that possible? Then this thing expands or blows up, covers all the space, this white light everywhere, and my consciousness is everywhere. So now I'm observing myself outside of myself, because I realized that I am that consciousness. But that consciousness was not just in my body, it was also outside of me.
I want to hit pause here, because most of us do not go about our lives and all of a sudden have a beam of light explode from the center of our chest and go into the universe. It's not something normal that we experience.
It's not normal, of course, right?
You were not drunk. You were not sleeping.
I didn't drink more than a glass of water that night. Everything was fine. I was in my best form. I was skiing all days. So I was physically very, very active as well. I mean, this is completely incomprehensible from any points of view. I never had anything like that. I could not even have imagined possible.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Incogni.
Your personal data is everywhere online, and that makes you an easy target for scammers. Websites legally publish and profit from your info, your name, home address, even court records. Once it's out there, it is fair game for stalkers, identity thieves, or really anyone with bad intentions. Last year alone, data breaches skyrocketed by over 200%. That means your private details could already be floating around shady directories, AI summaries, and people search sites waiting to be exploited. That's where Incogni comes in. Incogni hunts down your exposed personal data, not just from data brokers, but from across the entire web. Directories, search results, company databases, gone. Their custom removals feature takes it even further. Just send them a link and your dedicated privacy expert will handle the takedown. Whether it's a random court record or a sketchy people search profile, they'll make it disappear. Reduce your risk of scams and identity theft, protect your privacy, and reclaim your online solitude, all in just 3 steps. Create your account, give one-time authorization, and let Incogni do the rest. Remember, they can't harm you if they can't find you. Add up to 3 emails, addresses, and phone numbers to uncover even more hidden profiles. With the unlimited plan, you can send in any link and watch it vanish. Plus, it's risk-free. Cancel anytime or get your money back within 30 days if you're not satisfied. Scammers are getting smarter, but with Incogni, you're one step ahead. They're the only data removal service independently verified by Deloitte because your privacy deserves proof. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Head to incogni.com/Mayim and use code Mayim, MAYIM, to get 60% off an annual plan.
That's code MAYIM at incogni.com/Mayim. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Bubs Natural.
Getting older hit harder than you expected. I know it did for us. From stiff joints in the morning, recovery from the gym taking longer, hair thinning, nails breaking, dry skin that's lost its glow. Aging can really suck, but it doesn't have to. Luckily, Bubs Natural's collagen peptides are here to help you turn back the clock. Starting in your mid-20s, your collagen production actually starts to naturally decline. That's where Bubs Natural's collagen peptides comes in. Bubs helps restore collagen levels closer to what your body naturally had in its youth, so your joints feel stronger, your hair and nails grow healthier, and your skin looks smoother. Collagen is the most abundant protein. It's often referred to as the glue that's holding us all together.
I want extra glue to hold me together. That's why I use Bubs, and I found a really big difference. I'm actually very impressed.
You are bouncing back faster after workouts. It's allowing you to play more, which is great.
I'm actually bouncing specifically. I'm doing a lot of jump training and it's helping.
A lot more bouncing, no complaining about joint pain. Bubs is different than other collagen products with no junk, 0 sugars, sweeteners, or fillers. They're third-party tested and NSF certified for sport and Whole30 approved. You know it's clean and trustworthy. Bubs is sustainably sourced from grass-fed, pasture-raised cattle and dissolves seamlessly in coffee, water, or smoothies without taste or clumps. They have over 100,000 happy customers and were voted 2024's best collagen by Health.com. Bubs Naturals also sells electrolyte supplements, MCT oil creamer, and more. Live better longer for a limited time only. Our listeners are getting 20% off at Bubs Naturals by using code BREAK at checkout. Just head to BUBSnaturals.com. Use code BREAK and you're all set. After your purchase, they're going to say, "Where'd you hear about us?" Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Besides the feeling of love, were you able to kind of step outside of the experience and say, what is going on? Or were you so immersed in the experience that you didn't have that perspective?
I was the experience. While the experience was going on, I was the experience, clearly, right? While this was going on, this light was everywhere, scintillating. A thought forms in my mind. And the thought is, wow, this is the stuff of which everything is made. And by that, those were mental words. But before the mental words, there was a thought. And for the first time, there was a thought that was before it became words. This I realized later. But when I was doing it, it was like I was stunned because it was a thought and then there were words. Where normally before I was always thinking in words. So, there were never thoughts that were without words. And in fact, this was only with a lot of work that I did later that I could separate the thought before it's verbalized, is reified in our mind. It is, which is how it must be in consciousness before it is transformed into words, mental words. And then the thought that we normally think is the thought, which is already mental. It took me years to actually, meditation and so on, and then realizing what I was doing. So I'm now moving back many years forward, but back at this point, I realized that there was a distinction. There was a distinction between this flash of insight and then the words. I say, this is what everything is made of. Also, at that time, the feeling with that energy was not only love, but also peace and joy. They were mixed in. They were not separable. But the peace I have never felt before. Peace was a new idea for me. Peace was I am that. My restlessness was no longer there in that experience. I because my restlessness was the fact that I was never where I was.
Mm.
But now in this experience, I am that. This stuff is me
Mm.
because my my self, the sense of self, my consciousness was out there. So I was both the observer and the observed. That's another complete change of perspective. As I was telling you before, I thought that I was separate from the world. Now, this experience is I am the world observing myself. Big change of perspective. I am a part whole of one. I have because I have the same character of one. I have the same potentiality of one, but I'm also a part of one. Just like a cell in our body is a part whole of the body because it has the genome of the entire body. Every cell contains the genome of the whole organism, of the one organism. In this case, we are a part whole of the universe, which we are a field. We are not the body. So clearly, the idea that I am before my consciousness, the sense of myself was only in my head. It was not even in my body. It was in my head. And now with this experience is everywhere, not only in my body, but also outside of my body. I mean, that's a change like this to this, right? Complete reversal of perspective that I had before. And the other thing is that my body was vibrating, and it was hot. So every aspect of me was living this experience. This was a lived experience. It's a lived way to know. Is you know because you experience all those things I can say now, but they were implicit in that experience. But it took years to unroll in a way that experience which probably lasted a minute, maybe two, but no more. So this was just like a unbelievable flash, but it changed my life because it told me that what I thought I was not what I was because the sense of truth of that experience was so strong that I could not compare it to anything that had happened in my life before that was as true, as powerful. Consciousness is the one that allows you to know that. Is this an imagination? Is this a fantasy? Or consciousness can actually tell you if that is true or not, or close to the truth than any other thing. All of us have one day or another had a dream that was so vivid that you thought you were the dream, right? You truly existed in that dream. I had many dreams before of that nature, but even more later after this experience. But where basically you wake up and for a second you thought you were actually, that this reality it was a dream, not the other one. But this one was even stronger than that. And that's why it had the power to transform my life. Otherwise, how could it have the power to transform my life? I would have doubted my own, my own experience, right? I would have said, well, maybe I better go see a psychiatrist here, see what he tells me, right? So he tells me what I feel. Well, we should be able to know what we feel ourselves.
There's a few points here in your story that stand out for me. One is we hear a lot of people who have a drastic spiritual awakening, which it sounds like this was for you, where they question it, right? They wonder, am I going crazy? Am I making it up? What did I feel or not. And the difference between an imagination and a fully embodied experience is the vibrating of the body, the fact that it was fully immersive and that you are not just imagining something in a waking state or an imaginative state. You're not daydreaming. You're having a full visceral experience that is exceptionally powerful.
Everything was going with it. There was a unity in the experience, a unity in the experience. I am inside, outside, and body, mind, and spirit.
The other thing that's fascinating and describes a lot of what is common in a way when you have a spiritual experience is realizing that thoughts exist before we're able to translate them. That information and ideas exist in this collective field that we're going to get into, and we want the scientific explanation of how you think that exists, but that the universe, the world that we live in, is made up of all of this information, and simply our brains are the interpreters and the translators of that information into a language so that things can, for lack of a better word, exist all around us, and yet they just can appear. And we have to figure out, what does that mean? How do we communicate them? How do we translate that into something that's shareable?
Yeah, well, in the way I say it these days is that meaning comes first. In other words, meaning comes before symbols. The symbols are invented in order to carry meaning. But if there is no meaning, there shouldn't be any symbols because the meaning comes first, come before symbols. In science, symbols have no meaning. The information is only the probability the symbols appear or not. That's it. There's no meaning to the symbols. That's it. Now I can say it clearly. At that time, it was inherent in the experience. But to unpack that experience, it took me years, right? But also years to get to the source of understanding. Now my theory actually it can explain what happened, but before it was, this is the opposite of what scientism has been telling me. Not science with the capital S, but scientism, the ideas that we have about the world.
What was it like for you after that minute, the next day, remembering that you had this experience? Were you able to go back to that state, or was it something like a reminder that, was it something in your memory that you were like, wait a second, that existed, so like I have to unpack it and understand it? How did it change your life in like the day, the week after?
Basically, it was very clear that there was a message from a deeper part of reality which I couldn't know, but that message had to be followed. It was very clear, and it was a personal message, almost like I would say my high self opening up the kimono and saying, "Look, man, this is what's real." And then figure it out.
So you were set out on a journey in that moment afterwards.
Absolutely. I was set out on a journey. They started immediately, within days. I mean, after I came back and, obviously, I was running a company and so on, but I think it was probably 2 weeks before, later on, that I found a person to go and begin the process. And that was the, process that lasted about 20 years that allowed me to arrive at the conclusion that consciousness and free will must go hand in hand, and they must be fundamental. They cannot be explained in any other way. When I got to that point, I said, now my next step is to join science and spirituality, figure out a way to combine, because it was clear that only quantum physics could explain, if any, what happened. But now, actually, I've arrived to the point where I said we have to start there. And the fact that we are conscious and have free will can explain why the world has to manifest itself as quantum physics. You see, it's a complete reversal again. For many years, I was trying to explain consciousness and free will. Quantum physics, as is quantum physics, was more fundamental than consciousness and free will. Now I say no. Consciousness and free will are the fundamental ontology, and quantum physics is the way, the manifestation of that ontology that then begets certain mathematical properties, which are really maps of a territory. But the territory is consciousness and free will. These fields that have this property, they communicate with each other, entities, but they're not entities in space and time. They're entities in a deeper reality that control bodies which are in what we collectively call space-time, which is a construction that we made because we have similar bodies, similar ways of thinking, similar culture, and so on. But the deeper reality is a reality that has entities that want to know themselves. And through those entities knowing themselves, one, the totality of what exists, knows itself.
Well, yeah, and in Irreducible, you kind of take us through all of these paths.
Yes, but the new book actually goes the next step, which is because that book still wanted to explain consciousness and free will with mathematics, with quantum physics. And then it was only writing my third book that I realized one day I said, "Oh, I'm stupid. Yeah, this is I had to turn it around. We have to. I cannot explain consciousness. We have to start there. That's ontology, and then the math is, which is quantum physics, is really math. The only ontology of quantum physics is the quantum fields are ontological. That's it, and you start there. With quantum physics, you start with the quantum fields, and the ontology is there, but that ontology does not contain consciousness and free will. And so you only describe the outer aspect of reality.
This level of depth, though, I think is one that we want to spend a little bit of time in. So consciousness, you say, is the ability to experience qualia, right? To experience the qualities of the things that we kind of identify and experience, and to know the meaning of the experience.
That's exactly right. That's the deeper thing of qualia. Qualia are just like symbols are bringers of experience. Qualia are the bringers of meaning of the experience. And that's a deeper aspect.
So there's things that we experience, then there's the meaning that we draw from them. But what we're now talking about is, what does it mean to say that the universe was alive and conscious from its outset? Because this is something that you talk about, that consciousness is a quantum property of a field and not the property of the states of the field. Can you explain kind of how this works into our understanding of the difference between meaning and sort of a larger oneness of meaning?
First of all, there is one, right? One is the totality of what exists. And one, described by quantum physics, has two fundamental properties. Is dynamic, meaning is never the same, keeps on changing, never the same. But we all experience that. And second, is holistic. That took a while, because holism comes from a property called entanglement that exists only in quantum physics. Particles, when particles interact, they get into common joint states. That information that is created in that interaction, independent of distance afterwards. And that is, nobody can explain how that can happen. But what it means is that everything is interconnected. The universe is not made of separable parts. Not only that, but the particles, what we have imagined as little ball, when you measure them in one point, you think is a point particle. They are states of fields. They are not separable from the field. They are states of the field, like waves of a sea. The wave of the sea are states of the sea. But if we don't see the sea, we only see the wave, we think that the wave is separate from the sea. That's a little bit to understand what we have thought about an electron. An electron is a wave in the sea, which is the field of electrons. Only when it is an excited state of the field, because it can exist, that electron can exist as a non-excited state of the field, and it still exists, but we don't. It's inside the water. We don't know. We cannot tell anything about it.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Symbiotica.
Wow, it seems like all I hear about right now, including me, is people struggling with stress, with sleep, with focus. Symbiotica's here to the rescue with high-quality supplements that you can trust and your body can absorb. We love their magnesium L-threonate, reduces brain fog, calms and balances mood, and helps support a restful sleep. Also, liposomal delivery actually makes a difference. It does mean faster nutrient absorption, and its patented compound can effectively cross the blood-brain barrier, and the yummy vanilla cream flavor is delicious. It's completely stress-free also to incorporate Symbiotica into your life. Vacations, road trips, doesn't matter. The little packets fit right into your bag whenever you need support. Stay consistent this fall with Symbiotica. Feeling off lately? Give it a try. It actually made a huge difference for us. Go to Symbiotica.com/break for 20% off plus free shipping.
That's Symbiotica.com/break for 20% off plus free shipping. Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Blissy.
You know, I did not know, my dermatologist mentioned this, that traditional cotton pillowcases can actually cause hair damage, skin breakouts. It makes sense, but now you can rest easily, literally, with Blissy, just like me. Their pillowcases and hair accessories are better than satin, which is actually made from synthetics, can be rough on hair and skin. It's cheap for a reason. Blissy's pillowcases were voted best gift of the year of 2024. Hint, hint, for this gift-giving season. Their pillowcases give you healthier skin and hair in weeks, reduce fine lines and wrinkles, eliminate frizz, protecting color-treated hair in particular, even preserving that hairstyle that you managed to nail this morning. Blissy's dermatologist tested and recommended. It's clinically proven to not clog pores, unlike cotton, and has naturally hydrating silk fibers, keeping skin moisturized all night. They're also, get this, antibacterial and hypoallergenic and easy to care for. They're machine washable. They've got over 99 colors. How's that even possible? Including a new Wicked and Harry Potter line. And they're also available at Target. It's a good thing you haven't seen me post a messy bedhead in a while. Very hard to do with Blissy. They're naturally cooling. They're naturally breathable. A lot of times I wake up and I'm all sweaty and that contributes to the badness. Not anymore. Because you're a listener, Blissy's offering 60 nights risk-free plus an additional 30% off when you shop at blissy.com/breakpod. That's BLISSY.com/breakpod. Use the code BREAKPOD to get an additional 30% off.
Your skin and hair will thank you.
The reality is just not even close to the reality that is revealed to us in the physical space and time. Where there are macroscopic objects, and the macroscopic objects are separate from each other, and so also the world of computers. The world of computer, the bit of the computer is separate from the other bit. There is nothing. The bits don't have anything in common with the other bits. Okay, so we create numbers with those bits, but each bit is independent and has to have only two states, 0 or 1. So we use physics to create this logical thing that we have invented, because we have invented the bits. The bits are not in the computer. If you open up the computer and say, do you see bits moving around? And there are no bits moving around. There are signals moving around, but those signals are structured in such a way that they carry distinguishable states that you then can use to do whatever we do with the computers. But those states are not the same states like an electron is to the field. Those bits are our creation that is imposed on matter, and it works until matter is deterministic, behaves in predictable ways. If you raise the temperature of the computer too much, the computer then stops working, because that distinction that we have put into matter can no longer be maintained. So it's our construction. It's a construction of consciousness. It's not a construction in the computer. The computer doesn't know anything about bits. You see the subtlety here, because we think the reality is made in a certain way, but in fact, we are imposing a certain type of distinction there are mental distinctions and conscious distinctions that then we attribute to reality. Probabilities, for example, can only happen if you are conscious, because only a conscious being wants to predict what will happen in the future, especially in a reality like the classical reality, which is deterministic. In a deterministic reality, there are no probabilities, there are only certainties. The probability are a lack of knowing about something that if we knew, we could predict the future. And therefore, there would be no probability. We would predict exactly what will happen. So probabilities already include the existence of consciousness in the definition. Quantum physics is all about probabilities. It's not about physical variables. It's all about probability.
When you talk about reality, and obviously this is a concept you can talk about conceptually, but I'd like you as a physicist to explain to us what you mean when you say reality is not what we think it is. And you can go as micro or as macro as you'd like. And I think the beauty of what you talk about is that it includes the micro in the macro and the macro in the micro.
The fundamental reality is the reality of our inner experience. And yet, that inner experience is not separate from the material or the mental aspect. That inner experience is part of what we call spirit, the spiritual reality. In reality, there are three aspects of reality which are intertwined. They cannot be separated. The material, which is the body, the mental, which is actually the prediction of what might happen in the future. That's what actually quantum physics does. It gives you probabilities. But then it's the spiritual nature that has the experience of that reality and also the free will decisions that by knowing the probabilities, they pick whatever they want with free will. So we construct the future by the collective decisions that we fields, not we bodies, we fields make. In other words, the deeper reality is the reality of meaning and experience. That's the deep and free will and the self-knowing that we get out of it and the love, the aspect in which all those three aspects are superimposed. They exist together. The body is like red, the mind is like blue, green, and the spirit is like blue, right? When they combine together, they create white, the white light, right? So the three together, but where you have red and green, that superposition is quantum and classical, a type of information which is the one that would describe living systems. A cell works with the principles of quantum physics and classical physics. Computer works with only the principle of classical physics. That's the body, the center of the body is that type. The center of the quantum reality is actually the quantum state, which actually allow you to predict possibilities in the future, which then the spirit decides. And the spirit, the center of the spirit is the meaning of the information. Where the mind and the spirit overlap, there is qualia, the experience. And that experience can be described with the quantum state of a field. But that description is not a description of the experience, is only a map. The territory is the experience. The map is just a quantum state, which is a vector in Hilbert space, blah, 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 blah. But that is a map.
Right. And our limitation is that we identify our ego, we identify with our body. So the reality that we have and that we construct the world with is, well, I see this, I touch that, this is my job, this is my political party, this is the color of my skin, this is my religion, this is reality, this is who I am. But what you have said is that that way of thinking and that over-identification of the ego with basically our sensory system, right? You said that it can lead us to censor the parts of ourselves that actually give us the true reality of what we can perceive from the body, the mind, and the spirit. Is this the satiety, which is spelled like deity, but it has an S?
Yeah, they say the satiety is this field with these properties. You see, so consciousness cannot be seen as an entity. Consciousness is a property of a satiety. And satiety, I use the word satiety because the quantum field, which is the quantum aspect of that reality, is only a portion of that reality, which is the only portion that physics recognize, which then is described in quantum states with all the equations and blah, blah, blah. But that portion has eliminated the deeper aspects, which are the body and most important, spiritual aspects, which are the fact that we have experience and the fact that from the experience we get meaning, we get self-knowing. The meaning is the essence of the self-knowing.
One of the most practical applications of your spiritual experience and this really approach to understanding reality is you talk about how the destruction of the environment is one example of us not being in alignment with how the sum of the parts, right, are bigger than the whole. That the notion of a continuous cooperation as a species is actually consistent. And obviously, there's so many, the politicization of climate change is a ridiculous conversation that we don't need to get into. But the notion of what does it mean not just to be in alignment with yourself, which we're very good at in capitalist Western societies, but what does it mean to be in alignment with not only those around us, but with the species as a whole? Can you talk about how this understanding, I literally quoted this. You said that when our rationality is uniquely informed by the principles of materialism, reductionism, and survival of the fittest, it can only lead to an unbridled competition, racism, and war. So you talk about this kind of competition and racism, war, and the environment as consequences of what happens as a species when we are not aligned with true reality.
Yeah, but because the true reality starts with what is the purpose of one. Now, of course, you can say, well, but who can tell the purpose of one? Of course, I cannot tell the purpose of one, but by looking at the deepest aspect of ourselves, we can infer that one wants to do exactly what we want, which is to know itself. We want to know who we are. We are here. I mean, the deepest aspects of human beings is we want to understand who we are. Knowing yourself, is in, the temple of Apollo, in Delphi, is in the history of humanity, but even before, the Vedas talk about this same principle. So I start with that principle. I start one, the totality of what exists is dynamic, holistic, and before I didn't finish, and I put one third condition on one. One wants to know itself. So the wanting to know itself, the wanting is what then reflects into our will, our free will, because we also want to know ourselves, but we have to have the will to do that and the capacity to do that. And to know itself, one must be conscious. So conscious is a necessity of the fundamental principle, which I consider a postulate. You have to believe it or not, but because you cannot prove it. But then from there, you can see that quantum physics emerges naturally from those properties.
That's a really important point, that so many of us think of quantum physics and all of these like subjects that not everybody understands as something outside of us, when the fact is it's just the attempt to articulate a deeper reality that the mystics have known for thousands of years. You experienced at midnight outside of Lake Tahoe, which no one knows why. But I think that is the thing that also people who have psychedelic or transcendental experiences, they describe a very, very similar explanation of our purpose here. People who have near-death experiences, who leave this realm and have experiences of consciousness that also include 360-degree vision, which isn't even a thing unless you remove your consciousness from the body that it's in. So the fact that we're seeing all of these things align, you give it such validity because you are a man of science. You are a person who has invented the things that structure the way we understand a biologically mechanical world. And yet you have this insight to be able to say, guess what? There's something that you can't even see or touch. You can feel it, but not with your senses. It's something deeper that very few will touch, but our purpose here is to keep looking for it.
Science is about knowing, right? So, why is so important science? Because it is knowing outside what is outside, but But science today has forgotten there is also an interiority, there is an inside. And in fact, scientism erase the inside. There is nothing there. We are only a machine, right? If we are just a machine, there is only outside. There is nothing inside. That is the fundamental problem. But if you start with one dynamic holistic wants to know itself, and when one knows itself, it creates a field. It creates what it knows, because knowing and and existing are two words for the same thing. When one knows itself, you bring into existence what it knows. And so knowing is existence. Ontology is in the knowing, in the meaning, in the interiority. That's the point. And then we fields, then there are fields of fields, blah, blah, blah. It's a complicated world. But the point is that for me to know myself, I need to know the others like myself. That's what cooperation is. I cannot know the others like myself if I don't cooperate. And what is that allows us to cooperate? Love. Love. And what is love? Love is the taste of meaning. Love from the inside is the taste of meaning. The more meaning, the more taste. The 10,000 more powerful love that I ever tasted was the meaning of me experience in Tahoe. That was me, my meaning. Incredible love. That's me.
You sound like a deadhead. You sound like someone who wants to travel the world just spreading love and good times.
But the point, but from the outside, what is love from the outside? From the outside, love is a force that brings into resonance the interiorities of our fields. That is not classical in resonance. It's not pendulums that oscillate in synchrony. It is the inner state, which is the meaning. That meaning becomes the same meaning, and it is love that brings the meaning to be the same in the various fields as a force. What is the equivalent from the seen by the physicist? I don't know, but I suspect possibility gravitational force. Why? Because the gravitational force is the only universal force and is only attractive. It's only attractive, and it is the smallest force. But that smallest force can create stars out of which we create the nucleons, which cannot be created in any other way.
You talk about this rationality inspired by heart. You talk about this incredible heart opening, and I can't help but think of the ways that we describe love in human terms, right? That we feel like we're going to float away, and you have to bring yourself back to earth when you're in love, right? You're floating, your head is in the clouds. And it's so interesting that we're talking about gravity being this grounding universal quantum force that is saying there is a way to come back to a source, which I would hold is this oneness that we're talking about. I also love that you say that quantum physics actually doesn't describe an outer reality. It's describing the inner reality. And again, most of us would think, I'm not a physicist. I don't know what he's talking about. But the fact is, we have had to create words. And you talk about this, and this is, what I love about this book, before we get to your next book, is you take us from literally the beginning of evolution, the evolution of the universe, and also the evolution of us.
Where is life? Life for scientism starts with a living cell, which nobody knows how it could possibly be made by random variation in selection, because there is no selection yet, but never mind that. But the point is that you start with cells. No, life is the first act of love of one that wants to know itself and creates fields. Those fields are parts whole of one. Those fields are parts whole of one. That fields, since one is holistic, it cannot create part of itself. It must create a totality of itself, but with a point of view, with the way in which it knew itself when it created that field, that self-knowing. That is the identity. That is the identity of the field, and that remains for forever in that field.
And so what you describe is if you go from however we got that first single-celled organism, if you go from that, like, we had to come from somewhere, meaning there was a mother of a mother of a mother, right? You can keep tracing it back. And at a certain point, your brain starts to bend, which is why in certain religious traditions, you don't get to study these things unless you have a certain level of intellectual sophistication, because it will make you go crazy, right? But at some point, we got to the humans that we are. But you talk about the evolution of language. What was language? It was the decision by a group of some species to say, we have more to communicate and we need more ways to do it. But it's completely arbitrary. And for those of us who speak more than one language, we know that it's an arbitrary collection of sounds and phonemes and gestures that we say we're just trying to describe meaning. And ultimately, the thing that we have to get to is, how do you perpetuate the species, right? And for Homo sapiens, we get to insert love into that perpetuation of species, right?
Yeah, but in this view, we created the first cells. We fields created the first cells to have an experience collectively in this reality that we are creating. So they don't come from variations in selection, randomness. There is no randomness. Randomness is only ignorance. That's it. Only ignorance. But and also the languages, why do we need languages? Because we want to communicate the meaning that we find, but the meaning is endogenous. It comes from within. It doesn't come from without. Then it creates symbols, which are structures outside in space and time. Those are structures that we create to manifest the meaning that we have inside. But the creativity is within, this in the spiritual part. It's not in the body and not even in the mind. The mind creates, the mind does computation about what we have learned. And so it makes prediction. But the predictions are not reality. Predictions are probabilities. The reality is created by our choices as spiritual beings that choose to go to manifest this thing or something else. So that is very different than the way we imagine things. What we imagine things is that there are laws, and therefore the laws govern the world. But the laws are the byproduct. The laws are the laws simply are saying that there is coherence within one, and that coherence requires certain laws, certain coherencies that are reflected into the mathematical laws. But the mathematical law don't dictate what has to happen.
Coming from an entrepreneurial background, being in business being a winner-take-all attitude, whereby you have to corner markets and get as much market share as possible, get ahead of your competition. Where does love fit in to a notion of a new version of capitalism?
Once we start to accept that cooperation is the only game in town, as opposed to competition, we had to rethink everything that we do, because we start from kids, we start to compete. We are told to compete. I mean, the educational, even in the family, we are sort of, without even knowing, we're sort of set one against the other sometimes, right? And then, at schools, business, everything is about competition. And of course, competition leads to war. And, God knows how many wars we have lived through, in our many lives. We basically have to change the entire structure of how we interact with each other. So I'm not there yet. In meaning, I know that has to occur. We have to figure out how to do this. But, before we can do that, people have to understand that they are no longer bodies. Because if they think that they are bodies, automatically you go into the survival of the fittest, and then we have to have an experience that you are not the body, exactly like I had, and everybody can do that. The point is that the difference is that, I don't set myself as a special guy that, you have to believe me. No, 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 no. Everyone has to experience its own connection with one. Without that experience, we will not believe, because the weight of our experience, that we think that what, this physical reality is the only reality, is so powerful that unless you have an even more powerful experience that tells you that that's not so, you're not going to change. You're not going to, not given a chance, given a chance.
You won't even be able to think about the new paradigm without the embodied experience of realizing there's another way of being.
This is where people see the divide, that there are those of us that are going to compete and get ahead, and they're going to trample on all of the working class and all those other people, and they're going to be having their yachts and all the other things that rich people do. And then there's the spiritual people who are going to be ridiculed, right, for believing that there's more than just what we see and what we experience. And there's this sort of divide.
Yeah, but also the spiritual people are not, they live in their own world, and so they're kind of say, well, the stuff is not real. No, the reality is body, mind, and spirit. Everything has to work together, and so both have to make a move toward joining together. Unfortunately, they stay separate, like like quantum physics and general relativity. They don't want to come together, in some ways, but because everybody wants its own way. But no, we have to cross that divide. We have to merge. Merge is the right word, fuse them. There is no longer a boundary between science and spirituality. What science has that spirituality doesn't have much of is rationality. And the principles of experiments prove whatever theory you have. Because physics lives and dies on experiments. If you may have the most beautiful theory, but if the theory makes a prediction that doesn't happen, the theory has to be scrapped. So the experiment is more fundamental in science than the theory. In spirituality, it has to be the same. We have to reach similar states, and we have to be able to talk about it, and we have to be able to see that they are us. They are no longer objective like the outer reality, but they are subjective. But this subjectivity overlaps enough to be able to say, yeah, we're talking about the same thing. But it comes from experience, inner experience instead of outer experience. That's where the joining can come. And that's why spirituality has to be the right word, not religion, because there are 200 religions in the world. They better combine themselves first, right? They cannot even agree with themselves. How can we create science and religion? Right? There's religion. I mean, you have to have 200 science and religions then, because all the religions are different. So, but there is only one physics in the world. So at least physics has already arrived to a level of unity, because everybody agrees, because of the principles of physics are very clear. You have a theory makes prediction, and you make an experiment. If the experiment, says the theory is right, well, even if the theory says something that appears crazy, reality is that crazy. That's exactly what has happened in the last 100 years, because quantum physics makes predictions that nobody thought that could exist, that kind of reality. And now we know that there is a reality much more different than what we thought.
You've talked a lot, and your book includes so much about the differences between computers and humans, and the differences between biological systems and those that are, let's say, being utilized for artificial intelligence. And what you talk about is some of the beauty that every interaction that cells have is so much more than the sum of its parts. You talk about homeostasis, you talk about metabolic processes, and it's not enough to say, oh, cells are more than the sum of their parts. You're talking about, and again, you can think about this on a human level, it's not just the individuals that are more than the sum of their parts. It's the interactions, the processes that occur when these units interact is so much more than you could even imagine in the greatest fantasy. So can you talk about the cell being this microscopic, beautiful quantum classical system, but the human being this macroscopic one, and what that means practically for us?
Basically, if you look at the organization of the body, the organization of our body is, we have 30 to 50 trillion cells, and each cell, as I mentioned even earlier, is a part whole of the entire organism, because they all came out of a single cell, And each cell of these 30 plus trillion that we have has the same genome. So it has the same fundamental capacity to express as the original cell that created the entire organism. That's amazing. I mean, right now there are, in quantum biology and also in advanced biology, there are people that can reverse, a cell that is specialized can be made to be a stem cell, which is like a plenipotentiary cell that can create any other cell, revert in a sense, to become closer to the original cell that created the entire organism. Can you do that with a computer? Is a computer organized the same way? Not even close. Not even close. A computer is made of switches, on, off, on, off, on, off. That's it. At the best, the computer can know its own state, which is I'm open or I'm closed. That's it. There is nothing else for the computer. A cell has the potential to understand the other cells because they have the same making. You can explain the operation like a machine by deterministic things. But in living system, the cells make decisions which are highly probabilistic. You can only predict probability because these cells are quantum and classical system. Each cell doesn't work with the principle of classical physics. They work with the principle of quantum physics primarily, and then certain processes are closer to classical and other are purely quantum. And we do not understand how a cell works as an informational system. That's why in my book I speak about live information, which is a different type of information between quantum information and classical information. That information will in the future be able to explain how living cells are informational systems, not biochemical systems. We have studied cells as if they were biochemistry. No, not even close. We can only explain a tiny bit, but cells are connected directly. All our cells are connected with the field that we are. So the field that we are communicate with the body, it doesn't communicate with a piece of the system. It communicates in parallel with the entire body. So the potentiality to self-healing, for example, by people that are developed spiritually, are enormous. But yet we have to start by changing the idea of what we are. If we think that we are the body, there is the only intervention has to come from the outside. We are the field that we are can affect the body in ways that we have still to find out.
So, if we approach the cell and the biological systems as not just biochemical processes and those that obey the laws of classical physics,
as informational systems.
Right. If they are informational systems, this would be support for the notion that Bruce Lipton talks about, that the cell is operating as a microcosm of the entire organism.
We're talking about holographic systems where the part is like the whole.
So changing the environment of the cell, as it were, creating more positivity, whatever that looks like on a cellular level, is what has the potential, you're saying, to then heal the body in ways that, let's say, Western medicine may not be able to touch.
And right now we have to do it from the outside because we don't have developed enough of our own, our own soul, if you want to call it that way, but our own spiritual aspects.
So the next sort of evolution in medicine would be for all of us to have a better collective understanding of this sort of oneness and the deeper reality that consciousness and free will are providing, so that even medicine could be affected by the ways that we approach the cellular systems. It's fascinating.
That's right. And the way that you approach the cellular system is you start with love again, because and the medicine that we practice today moves away from love because it's all about machines. We are repairing a machine, and that's it. And the doctor that looks at the computer doesn't even look at you, and he asks a question and types on the computer.
This is why people are going to energy workers and healers, which some of them are legitimate and some of them are not. But the notion that there is a spiritual solution to what is going on that is presenting itself as a biological one.
And sometimes it works in ways that appear to be miracles, and they're not miracles because it shows that there is something that can come from the inside out, not only from the outside in. And besides, when I say outside in, is the in is a different one, because when I say from the outside in, there is nothing in other than organs, which is still outside. It is part of the outside in my meaning, because the inside is not in the body. The inside is the inner reality or meaning of qualia and meaning. That's not in the body, it's in a field that controls the body. Okay, so unfortunately, the words can deceive us.
We hear a lot from people who listen who are trying to understand this, right? They're trying to change their life. They may be suffering in this moment. What I'm hearing and what I believe to be true is that the first step to accessing a spiritual awakening, to accessing the ability to start to heal oneself through adjusting the field, is to start to change the mindset. First, to believe it is possible, and second, to start to understand the mechanism that we're actually changing something when we start to invoke love, when we start to meditate, when we start to have a belief that something is possible. We're not just wishful thinking, we're actually changing the frequency that is everything that surrounds us, which then impacts the cell.
In my experience, the first step is to take responsibility for what happens in your life. Okay, and that's the lesson that I learned by being CEO of a company, in fact, of more than one company, where the good and the bad that happens in the company, in one way or another, I had a lot to do by doing something, or even more, by not doing something when I should have done something. That is an idea that in the beginning was hard to grasp, because it is mostly by not doing what you should be doing that you attract to yourself suffering and whatever. Okay, for example, it was not taking care of myself, for example, my inner reality, that I became very estranged for myself and I was unhappy with my life. Okay, for example, it was not because I did something wrong, it's because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And so it is very important to take that responsibility. And it was exactly because I had taken responsibility of my life that when I was suffering, I say, somehow I created that for myself. I didn't look outside somebody to blame for my state, but I say, what did I do? I want to know, what did I do to create this to myself? Who am I? Why is that? Why is that going on? With that sense of responsibility. This is my life. I am in charge of my life. That very important. Because if you don't go there, you will always find outside the problems that affects you. They always come from the outside. That's why you go to the outside to find the cure. But once you know that your happiness or not depends on you, from your interiority, from your conscious self, to your inner experience, the meaning, the love that you have within for yourself and from others, that stuff, then you can find the solution. But if you don't, you had to reach there first. Otherwise, you will always look at some kind of magic inside or outside to solve your problem, but it's not you.
We'd like to talk a little bit about your new book, which we just got a little taste of. And one of the quotes that I wanted you to talk about as you introduce us to what this next book is, we're not matter, we're not mind, we are spirit. That is meaning, love, joy, and peace. And if we want to have a better future, we must all radically change direction together. And to do this, we must first change our minds about who we are. I inverted those intentionally. Talk a little bit about what this means and what this new book is going to introduce us to that is not covered in Irreducible, which I can't imagine there's anything left because I love this so much. But tell us what we can expect.
Well, I mean, my next book is actually not in English yet. I mean, I had translated. It will be out in hopefully in 6 months or so.
Even people who speak English might think that this is not written in English. It's very dense.
That idea is an idea that will be my fourth book. It is an idea that the theory that I have can actually be explained very effectively with the concept of body, mind, and spirit, which I also illustrated earlier. Where you have essentially these three aspects are not separate. They're not separable. But so when we concentrate with one, we cannot lose sight that the other two are also present. When we tend to concentrate on one, we tend to separate the others because the way we write and the way we think tends to work that way because we focus on something. But in reality, body, mind, and spirit are three inseparable aspects which have overlaps, like I mentioned before. I mentioned three overlaps, plus the overlap in the center, which is all three together, which is the essence of one, essentially. That's the white light, the love, peace, joy, meaning, all that stuff. It's where we want to get to within ourselves in communicating and so on, to get to that meaning that unites, that brings us back to one. The next book is Beyond the Invisible, and Beyond the Invisible is actually a conversation, so it's easier to read and allows me to repeat things in different contexts without being accused of repeating myself. The context determines the meaning of, I mean, even particles, when, the property of the particles depend on the interaction that the particles has. So the reality is not built with things that are absolute. Everything is relative to each other.
We talk a lot about exceptional phenomenon. We talk a lot about extrasensory perception on this podcast. We really try and understand the science of many things that a lot of people would consider outside of science. I want to ask you a few things, and I want you to give us your most honest answer, both from your scientific and your spiritual perspective. Okay, I'm going to start with kind of a softball one. Collective consciousness. Is there a collective consciousness?
There is a collective consciousness. In a sense, we are a collective consciousness. We are fields of fields of fields of fields of fields. So we exist with a comprehension, which is all the comprehensions of lower levels. Like atoms are more than the parts that compose them, and the nucleons are more than the protons and neutrons, but then the neutrons are more than the quarks and the gluons, and this kind of thing.
What happens when we die? Is there an afterlife? Does consciousness exist after we die?
Yeah, I think that I believe the essence of the near-death experiences, of which there are hundreds of thousands, known, and hundreds of books written about. So people don't believe they should read at least one or two of those books and have a sense of it, because they are, their coherence of what happens is so strong that they and those are people that don't have the body doesn't work anymore, the brain doesn't work, and they have extraordinary experiences that change their life. How can that be that you have an experience that is so powerful that changes your life and you were not even functioning as a body? I mean, if we are the body, that's that needs to be explained, and you cannot explain it by just eliminating it like scientism does. If you don't, there's something. If something that you cannot prove something, forget it. It doesn't exist. Well, that's too convenient.
Are we in a simulation? What do you think about simulation theory?
No, we're not in a simulation. But this reality, however, is mostly virtual reality, in the sense that but it's a virtual reality that we create. Now we're not in a simulator created by somebody else, and we are just little avatars there, thinking that we are, that we are what we are. No, that's not. No, this is a game that we have created, and we are in the game that we created. So we are actor, but also the creators of this game, and we learn from this game to create other games. so I mean, this is just but a lot of this reality that we think is real is actually a construction of information that is experienced as a reality in the field. So it doesn't exist here, it exists in the field, in our consciousness. But because the quantum states of the field are not separable from the field, I cannot say that this is virtual. Virtual reality is what you get with a computer, for
Right.
example, full virtual reality, where the bits of the computer are entirely our creations. They don't exist. We have created them. And we are the ones, our conscious is the one that gives reality to it when we put a headset and we see, space and objects and things going around, and we look around and it looks like it's a real reality, and it's all done by bits of the computer. That is virtual reality. That does not exist in the same sense that the game that I was talking about earlier exists.
We create our experience, therefore we can adjust our experience. So in that way, we can adjust the game. Some posit that the fields that all consciousness is a part of were created by some external force, which would be the potential for the simulation. Not that our personal experiences are simulated, but that the entire creation of consciousness and all of the fields that make up it may have an external creator.
It's like, my body is being created by a cell, and every cell of my body is a copy of that cell that created this body. Okay? So I'm self-created. There is not a creator. I'm a part whole of one. So I'm indivisible from one. So I'm one in some way, but not one in the sense that I'm all of one. I'm a part whole of one. It's an holographic principle. It's not made like computers are made. Machines are not made that way. They're not made of parts whole. They're made of parts. They are separable.
About the evolution of technology, you created the microprocessor before you had your big spiritual awakening. And so it's a two-part question. One, do you feel like that information was given to you in a way to have that breakthrough to create this world-changing technology? And two, how do you see the evolution of technology as it relates to our experience of ourselves, to either know ourselves? Some will say it's helped us know ourselves better, having conversations like this, being able to share information, while at the same time, it's distracted us from ourselves, increasing the ability to check out, to have digital distraction, and create companies that their sole goal is to take every moment of our free time and attention.
Perhaps my biggest invention was the invention of the silicon gate technology that allowed to make the microprocessor. That I did my first job when I came in this country. I was 26, working for Fairchild. And that technology was 5 times faster than the previous technology, was reliable. You could put twice as many transistors, and it had about 500 times less leakage current. So you could make dynamic random access memories. You couldn't do semiconductor memories before, but with this technology, you could do everything to make a computer in a single chip. And the first step was the memories, dynamic RAM, and the microprocessor. The microprocessor also used dynamic RAM inside, okay? Because the static RAM were too many transistors. So that is how I did this thing. And it was a number of intuitions that allow me to do that. And then, of course, a lot of work. But also the intuition was that the microprocessor were a new step in the evolution of computers that would allow, with this technology, to miniaturize and have computers everywhere and so on. And so that was something that I I understood, and I wanted to really create as fast as possible. And Intel in the early days did not understand, the management did not understand the microprocessor were the future. They thought memories were the future, computers, the big computers. They did not understand that the little thing could be a big thing. Right? We have now in one chip, we have now computers that couldn't even fit in a skyscraper, for Christ's sake. I mean, in a chip like this now. So I decided, my second generation microprocessor, the 8080 of Intel, that it took me 9 months to convince them, my management, to let me do it. And then when I done that, they were 6 times faster than better architecture, done faster than the previous ones. They still were wasting their time to get the next one. So I decided to start my own company. I said, that's it. I have enough of this. So I started my first company. It was Zilog, developed the Z80 that became a bestseller. I mean, it's still in production today, almost 50 years after it was introduced. So, but that compared to what I'm doing now is like child play, in a sense. Is a child play in the sense that it only covers this stuff, this stuff. But we are beyond measure, you know. We, I mean, that's what excites me, is that if we wake up to our own reality, I mean, the machines that we do is already the brain, our brain has about 100 trillion parameters. ChatGPT has 3 trillion parameters. So, and our brain consumes 20 watts of power. Nobody can build a computer better than the brain, but not even close, because our brain can do things that no computer in existence can do, even by itself, never mind by the connection with the field that we are, because it's like having a programmer and a conscious being connected with the brain. And the brain is just a machine. The brain is a machine. So the machine does what the programmer wants. Is on board, all is on board. So it's a new world. So technology, just use the way we use technology today without a sense of who we are, can become dangerous. And that's the danger that I see, is both in the nuclear technology that now an arsenal of tens of thousands of atomic bombs that any crazy person could use. So that's a very dangerous, very dangerous thing to have, sitting around. And of course, AI will become a major problem, or a major or a major abundance if it is used right. But to be used right, we need to change the idea of who we are. Because if we think that we are here to compete and to beat the less fortunate of us, that's not the way the technology will help. It will actually help those guys to destroy our humanity. And that's not the game that I would like to see.
Federico Faggin, it's really such a pleasure to get to speak to you. We're so grateful for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I'm curious how you heard his explanation of how the cell is impacted by changing our perspective and changing the state around us.
Look, I think this is a really important addition to so many of our conversations about, in particular, the kind of loving kindness meditation, the kind of focus on manifesting or placing yourself in an environment that feels like you've already achieved it. In the meditation that I led people in, that's over on Substack, that's what we talked about. Imagine something beautiful and create the emotional state as if you're there. It's very, very powerful. And I love how many different places we're getting for people to pull from support for that, whether it's Bruce Lipton, from this more kind of, cell biology perspective, or it's Federico Faggin from this, quantum and like microcosmic and macrocosmic, quantum collective consciousness sort of perspective. I'm super fascinated with this concept, of love. Again, that's just the word you put on it. Like, don't think about how you feel about the person that you're dating. And, oh, well, I'm in love with them. What does that have to do with it? We're talking about the state of feeling joy, peace, serenity, that you are loved, that you are taken care of. That's a different kind of, what he's talking about is almost like a fundamental, foundation of the universe, is that feeling that we were, and these are the religious concepts. We're created out of love, right?
His description reminds me a lot of like the first time I sensed energy, where my palm was tingling and all of a sudden I had an experience that was so foreign to how I had grown up and anything that I had experienced in the past that I couldn't reconcile it with my understanding of reality. And when he describes that in order to change and come up with solutions that may not be purely based on competition, that may be more cooperative, which we can't really imagine right now because our entire society is based on, well, if I get this, then you don't get that. And, anything else is seen as uncapitalist. And, it's described that capitalism is not the best option, but it's better than all the others.
Yeah, in some cases, I think you have to separate out these conversations. And I really appreciated your question, especially from, to ask the creator of the, what we use as a microprocessor and the phone that we hold in our hand, to ask that person, what would you have been like if you did not have a desire to compete, to get ahead, to run a company, like all those things. But I think what he was saying also is, and the question I didn't get to ask him, but I kind of feel like I can imagine the answer, if he didn't create the microprocessor, would someone else have? The answer is yes, of course. But would another human being have his particular awakening experience? No, that was his alone. But as he indicated, that part is indicative of the entire whole, right? And that experience is sourced in what he calls one.
Yes, and when he talks about having that experience that is not able to be reconciled with everything else we understand, to have that visceral, powerful, emotional, and intellectual change, that's the first step in solving other problems. When you say we have to keep these things divided, is because not enough people have had that awakening to then imagine a world without the current incentive structures that exist right now.
Totally.
And what I love about this conversation and about many of the others is that people start to paint an understanding and sort of shine a light on how they've done it, and others can start to do it as well, simply by hearing these and opening up to the possibility that there is more. When we had Deepak Chopra on, and he said, just by listening to this conversation, you are starting to change. It can feel like an overstatement. But if you've only seen the world in one particular way and you start to imagine it in a different way, that's the first step to having those visceral awakening experiences.
This book, as I said, it's incredibly dense, but it was a wonderful, a wonderful exploration, literally, of exactly what he says: consciousness, life, computers, and human nature.
We're going to have more about this conversation, reflections as they simmer for Mayim and I. We're going to talk about how each one of us can have their own spiritual awakenings. We tell stories about different ways people wake up and have these profound moments where they just feel a connection to something greater over on Substack. Join us, Mayim Bialik's Breakdown on Substack.
And from our breakdown to the one we hope you never have, we'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's Breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or two. One fiction, one. And now she's gonna break down